adding and subtracting fractions and mixed numbers. So we have multiplied and divided, so the next thing we need to do is add and subtract. So adding fractions vocab, some of these terms we need to remember are numerator, denominator, improper fraction, and mixed number. And then one that's important to remember that I wanted to make sure we racked our brain a little bit is a fraction with the same value, even though it looks different, is called an equivalent fraction. Okay, so remember, we can make equivalent fractions, and that's going to be really important for when we are adding and subtracting. So here's your video slide where all of your videos will be attached. Adding fractions with like and unlike denominators. So steps for adding like denominators. Write all problems vertically. That's the first thing you should do. So you should do 3 over 10 plus 9 over 10. Add the numerators and put it over the denominator, then simplify if necessary. So when my denominators are the same, I can just add the numerators. So I'm going to get 12 over 10. If I wanted to in this situation, because I know that can be reduced, I could do that right away. So I know that this is going to be 6 over 5 because I would divide by 2. And then I need to make sure I take my improper fraction and make it into a mixed number. So this is going to be 1 1/6 as a final answer. All right. So when the denominators are the same, it's very easy. So the steps for adding unlike denominators. Again, we're still going to write our problems vertically so they're easy to see. But you're going to find a common denominator and make equivalent fractions. All right, add the numerators and the denominator stays the same, and then simplify if necessary. So the big change here is we need to make sure we find a common denominator and then make equivalent fractions, which is important. So if I'm adding these fractions, 5/6 plus 3/10. So I need to find a common denominator. Now, if I don't see what the common denominator is right away, I can always multiply the denominators, and that would be a way for me to find the common denominator. But I see that 30 would be the common denominator. So then I need to make an equivalent fraction, so I do 6 times 5, which is 30, and then 5 times 5, which is 25. Equivalent fraction on the bottom, 10 times 3 is 30, so times 3, and I get a 9. So now when I add all of this up, I end up with 34 over 30. And again, I can simplify here if I wanted to, or I could turn it into a mixed number and then simplify. So let's do that. Let's turn it into a mixed number, and then we can simplify. So we're going to get 1 and 4 over 30. So I know 4 doesn't go into 30, so I'll have to divide by 2. This 1 comes over with me, so 1 and 2/15 is my final answer. All right, so finding our common denominator, and then solving after we find our equivalent fraction. Second example, I have 2/7 plus 1/3. And so what I need to do here is find my common denominator. This is one of those where I do multiply the numbers together, and that does end up being my common denominator. Multiply by 3 to make an equivalent fraction. So 2 times 3 is 6. 3 times 7 is 21. So I'm going to multiply by 7. Adding these together, I end up with 13 over 21. And I know that that cannot be simplified, so that is my final answer. And then lastly, I have 7/12 plus 5/6. Sometimes your common denominator might be one of your denominators that you are already given, and that's okay. So this one is easy because I can just put it as 7/12. I would have to multiply by 1, then multiply by 2 to go 6 to 12. So then I'm 10. Adding 7 plus 10, which is 17, over 12, which is 1 5/12. That's my final answer right there. All right, so if you're comfortable with finding common denominators, the rest of the fractions are really easy. It's things that we've already worked on up to this point. So the length of a rectangle is 7/8 inches long. All right, so whenever I see problems like this, I really like to make sure that I draw a picture. Okay, the width is 2/3 inches longer. So let's say, because I didn't draw a very good picture, this is my 7/8. So that's where I'm saying my length. And so then this, let's say, is my width. And so I need to make sure I add these two together. So 7/8 plus 2/3. So you could say this is 7/8 plus 2/3 is my question mark. And I need to then make my equivalent fraction or find a common denominator. I know 24 is going to be that common denominator. Multiply by 3 on top. So I'm going to get 21, and multiply by 8. So I am going to end up with 16. Adding these together, 21 plus 16 is 37 over 24. Now, making that into a mixed number, I know it's going to go in there one time with 13/24 left over, and that would be my final answer. And labeling it, we would put inches. And that's adding fractions with like and unlike denominators, which is what you're going to see on your assignment today.